This podcast is brought to you by Squarespace, and you guys know how much I love Squarespace. In fact, I use it for my own website, adamlerner.net. If you guys want to save 10% on your Squarespace and domain, use the code ADAM at checkout, ADAM, and you'll save 10%. Hey guys, and thanks for joining us for another episode of the Brooklyn PhotoWorks ISO320 Podcast. And today our special guest is photographer Chris Buck. Now, Chris Buck is one of those quirky photographers, and I mean quirky in a good way. He does things with his subjects that really kind of force you to scratch your head a little bit, to like dig a little bit deeper, to look a little bit beyond just what's in front of you. And I absolutely love that about his work. It's kind of like this kind of like restrained chaos that he has, you know, where like there's that moment that things could really explode and go wrong, but somehow he manages to encapsulate that in a way that looks almost casual, because he's just such an incredible craftsperson. He's such an incredible craftsman. His work just really resonates with me and my aesthetic. And when Daniel told me that Chris agreed to be on the podcast, I was so incredibly delighted. In fact, I was a little bit starstruck, to be honest with you, because I'm such an admirer of his work, and I wanted to learn everything. I wanted to know everything. And it actually turns out that Chris is incredibly generous with information. I mean, he literally shares so much about his mentality with shooting portraits, and his approach, whether it be his approach to working with his subjects, whether it's his approach to lighting, even the mentality to like going to a location and kind of figuring out how he's going to shoot his subject. Now, Chris has had a pretty impressive career. He's had many decades of a career in photography. You know, he started back in the 80s in the whole film world, shot medium format film, and then he transitioned to medium format digital. But interestingly, the technical aspect of his work, you know, it's obvious that his technical ability is extreme. However, you know, I think that where he really kind of focuses most of his energy and attention is how he interacts with his subjects and gets them to do the things that he does. So it doesn't mean that the technical stuff doesn't matter, because it absolutely does. And he's an incredible technician and craftsman. But I think that what you guys will probably get the most out of is how he interacts with his subjects, his mentality, how he mentally prepares for these shoots. There's a lot of nuggets in here that actually feel very, very much empowering, that kind of give you the permission to do what you do as a photographer, you know, so you definitely will hear that. I mean, you know, in this podcast, we talk about like this incredible photo shoot he did with Billy Joel. We talk about this incredible photo shoot that he did with Barack Obama, and the list goes on. And I mean, he's shot politicians, he has shot rock stars, he has shot everything and anything in portraiture, in pop culture. I would say pop culture is probably the driving force behind the majority of his work. If you don't already know his work, I would definitely suggest you just go to Instagram at the Chris Buck right now while you're listening to this thing and check it out. Otherwise, just sit back and enjoy and take a listen. And here we go. We are back with another episode of the Brooklyn PhotoWorks ISO320 Podcast. And today is an incredibly special day because we are joined by an amazing photographer, somebody who I have been following for years and admiring their work, mainly because they kind of, to me, like there's a punk rock vibe in Chris Buck's work. I'm just going to say we have Chris Buck on the podcast today, guys. How cool is that? I grew up, you know, listening to punk rock. The reason why I picked up a guitar at 13 was punk rock. And I don't even know if Chris even feels the punk rock vibe, but I'm sure he does. He's one of those photographers that picks projects that I would have never in a million years thought to pursue. And not only does he do them, he does them with like such an incredible level of commitment. And it's just when I look at Chris's work, when I look at your work, Chris, I'm always just so inspired and excited by what you're doing, because you always are pushing things to a level that is so far beyond, stuff that I would ever, imagine to come up with. And I think half of the people that are, out there, because I think that so many people are so worried about like being technically proficient and like say, hey, here's my chops. It's like, that guitar player that's just always like wailing on guitar. Like, I feel like that there's like this kind of like organized chaos, like this kind of, this way of you basically taking all of this excitement and being able to kind of like consolidate and encapsulate it so that as the viewer looking at your photos, you really have to kind of look in there and appreciate where that's coming from. In other words, it's not just in your face. And I love that about your work. I just recently picked up your book. I'm going to just come over here. And when I say pick up your book, I mean, you really need to be fairly strong. So Chris's book, Uneasy, this is something that it's going to take me a long time to get through this book. I've been going through this book slowly but surely, but there's just an incredible body of work in here. And at any point, you can certainly touch on this as well. But you've had a career that spanned quite a long time. And you've obviously progressed through so many different iterations of your work and different iterations in the technical aspects of work. And I want to hear everything. But in the interest of time, what really was the driving force that kind of got you to pick up a camera? And welcome.
Well, I just want you to talk the whole time. This is great.
I think you have a lot to say, my friend.
I was absolutely obsessed with pop culture as a kid. In my teen years, and my 20s, and my 30s, really too. Like, absolutely fully obsessed. Everything went through that filter. And so I really got into photography to be a part of that. And I didn't shy away from putting my stamp on things. And I learned really early on that was sort of, at least for me, that was one of the key things that made it come together, was to make it about what I felt and what I saw, and not necessarily like, yes, it's driven by the subject and who's in front of me, but it's at least half as much me. When you look at a picture and you feel something authentic in there, that's probably more me than it is the subject.
Wow.
People ask me, how do you get people to do stuff? And a big part of it is giving myself permission to go there by saying, I feel this, so I want to put that in the picture. And if the subject feels that too, or it resonates with the viewer connected to that subject, that's awesome. And probably my best pictures are that. But my going there is driven by my kind of making every portrait a self-portrait.
Wow. So the collaborative nature of your portraiture is always taking a lot of what you're feeling and imparting that onto your subject, so that the collaboration becomes a portrait that really embodies the spirit that you're feeling by you, but you're utilizing this person to kind of help to realize that.
Because I think early on, I wanted to collaborate with people, and I kind of, you think of, one of the first people I photographed, speaking of punk rock, was John Lydon. I mean,
Oh, wow.
kind of early-ish in my career. And I was sort of, he's John Lydon. He's like Johnny Rotten. He's going to like be magnetic and come alive. Well, that didn't happen. He was sort of waiting for direction, like everyone else, and I realized this isn't, I need to come like and take full responsibility. There's, like I do work with people, and obviously the best picture is there is a collaboration, but I kind of feel like I do all the heavy lifting up front, or me and my clients. And then the subject kind of, if they're present, and usually they are, they kind of deliver that last 10, 15% where they give a little performance. Like, think of Steve Martin with the bread fingers. He kind of gives it that last little bit of magic that brings it all together, And that's really how it happens. Everything else is all worked out by me or my clients or, our team. And it's really, I learned to go in there believing like, this is all on me. If this fails, it's me. If this is great, kind of me again.
I get that pressure. I mean, I know a lot of people like, I've said it before, like for me, coming from being a professional musician, photography and portraiture is a performance. So the minute you kind of step onto set, and that's kind of like a virtual term, you could be just in somebody's house, it doesn't matter. That's your performance. And that's not the time when you're like, oh, give me a second, let me figure this out, let me see, you really, so, and I think that displaying that confidence as a performer kind of, encourages the person you're collaborating with or the people to kind of elevate their performance as well, because they're putting their trust and faith in you. But I love what you're saying about the idea that you came to realize at a very early point that people want direction.
I mean, honestly, it wasn't like I was looking for some wisdom out in the ether. It was like I went to a shoot and I said, "Oh, what do you want to do?" And they just looked at me like, "Aren't you ready?"
You're the photographer.
Yeah, you're the photographer. Like, tell us what you want to do. Now, of course, people. I remember one time I was doing a talk and one of the audience members asked, "What do you do when they say no to your idea?" And I'm like, every shoot, people say no all the time. Like, you go on the next idea. Like, you go in with a dozen
Right.
ideas and you expect that like 8 of them they'll say no to. So I think that they still have agency to say no. I think of a photo shoot like a seduction. In the right, in most circuits, it's like you're going on a date with them and you're trying to get them into bed, and you're seducing them and you're bringing them along. You're kind of teasing them. You're inviting them. Sometimes it's direct, oftentimes not. It's you're trying to get them to open up and reveal themselves and show themselves. And like it's seduction, it is some partially overt, partially manipulative. Certainly consent is necessary, but it does come to you need both parties to participate to land in the right place. And if you don't do that, it's like if you just go up to someone and say, "Hey, come back to my place and let's fuck," you're not going to get anywhere. You need to lead up. You need to tease. You need to like bring them along. You need to like you say, do the performance where I show like I need to do my peacock walk. I'm worthy of this.
Hey Chris, how are you?
Hey, good to see you.
Has your preparation changed, or how has it changed from beginning of your career when you didn't have the body of work, when you stepped on in front of the, with your subject? Because right now your subject knows what to sort of expect.
No, almost never.
Mm-hmm.
People, it's still rare that people actually bother to look me up before a shoot.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I still find it amazing because all you have to do is like Google my name and look at my website, but
Couldn't be easier.
But most people don't bother.
And as a photographer, I know I do it. I'm sure every one of you guys does it. I look up my subject. I try to find out as much as possible.
Yeah, it's a big part of the job.
Yeah, because you might have some common ground. You might not, and realize there's got to be something that I can talk about with this person, to at least get them to warm up and kind of take the conversation away from the task at hand, so that we're kind of pals. Like you said, that seduction, the little dance. Have you ever on a shoot felt kind of like starstruck? Because you've photographed some very, very known people.
Sure.
And I know that there's times like where if I'm on a shoot, there are times like if somebody's really kind of like amped up, it's hard not to get amped up, and you have to be like, okay, you know what? That's your world. I need to take this down a notch. Do you ever feel that when you're on a shoot?
It's pretty rare. I mean, I'm certainly intimidated by people,
Right.
and scared of them. I mean, photographing Barack Obama in the White House, I mean, just keeping it together was really something, But I wasn't necessarily particularly a fan of him. It was more that I was photographing a sitting president. It was an amazing opportunity, but, possibly the biggest opportunity in my career. And if I could get a good picture, it's something I could like stand on for like years, I mean, when I have been an actual fan, like I photographed Leonard Cohen, and that was really tough. But one thing I did actually, funny enough, I learned a long time before to not let fandom get in the way of the work. But I did. But you use what you've got, and I could see he was a tough nut to crack. And obviously, I knew his work and his persona well enough to be aware it might go that way. And I was kind of making some notes and looking around his house. And he came and sat with me at a little table in the kind of living room, dining room area. He was very modest, very Leonard Cohen, like very, pared back. So he sits next to me, and I say to him, I'm actually a big fan. I'm really excited about this. It's really important to me that we get something really great out of this. And he pauses for a moment and he says, well, if you're meant to get something great, there's nothing in this world or any other that can stop that from happening. And I was like, wow, that's so cool. And then he says, and if you're meant to do something bad, there's nothing in this world or any other that can stop that. And I'm like, yeah, that's so Leonard Cohen to say that. but I was kind of, my point of it was not to express my fandom, but I was hoping to get him to kind of lean into me a little bit. I was hoping to get him on my side.
Right.
Even just that 10% where he's going to when I say, hey, hold still, this was great, he'll actually do it and not correct himself or whatever,
Right. I'm sure you've had those situations where there's like I've photographed, like some celebrity people as well. And there are some that are so kind of conditioned to do the photo session that they take over.
But that's a big problem. But I think that there's subtle things you can do from the beginning that can set that. It's funny, the most recent celebrity shoot I did was with this artist named Maurizio Catalan. He's that guy who taped the banana up at the that art fair.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So we were actually shooting in one of the last days that New York was really open before the shutdown for coronavirus. And so our location, the studio we were supposed to shoot in, they wouldn't let us in the building. So we had to pivot to a new place. And I literally, Daniel was asking how I prepare differently. One thing I do is I try to get to set earlier and earlier and earlier than I initially did in my early years. And now I try to get there about 3.5 hours ahead. And I had done so that day, but by the time we pivoted to a new studio, I had an hour. And so I had an hour for getting in, scoping the space, looking at the neighborhood, potentially for shooting outside, and actually doing all the lighting and all the light tests. So of course, when he came in, we were about 20 minutes behind still. And unfortunately for us, he was a manic personality and he took over the shoot. So for the first half of the shoot, he kind of ran everything.
Right.
And at some point I just had to pivot to a new setup and then take back control.
Yes.
And I do not like it when the subject, because he was a great subject. He was all over the place, but I'm not there for the performance. I need to get it. I need to get it shot. I need to get it on film, as it were. And if I don't get it, I don't care how entertaining it is or how much fun it is. If I don't have the shot, it's a wasted day.
Right. And I think all of us have had those days where, as good a job as we attempted to do, we pack our shit up and we're like, oh man, I don't know if I have anything.
Yeah.
And you don't even want to fucking look at it. And
you don't always get it at him.
Well, ultimately, when you look at it, you're like, it's there. And there's even those days where I think some of those days when you really are a little bit unsure, maybe the days when you did your best because you pushed yourself to a place that went beyond your comfort. And like Chris said, I'm sure, you go into a shoot with scenario A, B, C, and D. And then when you actually get the great shot, it was scenario F or G or even beyond.
Well, if you're meant, like my friend Leonard said, if you're meant to get a great shot that day, you'll get it. Nothing that can.
That's true. So I have a question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, I'll just respond to that for a second. I think, you asked about how I deal with intimidating subjects. And a big part of it is I really do believe as human beings we're driven by fear. And so I try to tap into the fear. So I So rather than being afraid of Leonard Cohen or Barack Obama, I tap into my fear of not getting a shot and fear of my client, frankly. Like, if I don't get the shot, like I photographed William Shatner a few years ago,
I
and I
love
remember
that shot.
I remember a friend saying like that guy's crazy. Like, wasn't it like really hard and intimidating? I'm like, yeah, like it was absolutely frightening. Like, I actually got William Shatner's autograph when I was a teenager. Like,
Right.
I was a real fan, but I was way more afraid of Esquire and them never hiring me again. That was my real concern. So I was willing to go to the wall with Shatner because in the pyramid of fears, being afraid of the client, I probably would never see William Shatner again. Like, I don't care if he likes me or he thinks I'm cool or whatever. I
Right.
care that Esquire's happy and hires me again.
You're not there to make buddies, but if that happens, that's a benefit.
Sure,
That's
that's
a
nice,
bonus,
but it's certainly not the goal. Yeah.
So I have a question for Chris, because one thing I noticed about your work, it's you have some really amazing and creative ideas. When you go for a shoot, do you have a clear idea in your head that I'm going to do this and it's going to go like that, or do you improvise on set and just let like get inspired by the subject, or do you have a clear idea?
So really, from the beginning, I guess I always had I like doing things that are a little conceptual, or using like a simple prop is often really fun. But what I would do is I come up with lots of ideas beforehand, and I kind of pare back a bit and then go in and look at, then see the set or deal with the subject or their people. And then I bring in new ideas and throw out old ideas. I mean, I'm always trying to do at least 5 different setups. I mean, I don't always do that, but that's the
Right.
goal. So my mantra on this front is prepare, 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 open, open, open. Because if I can be prepared, then I can have a conversation with the person. If there's a quiet time, I can pivot to a new idea that I've got in my back pocket. But then I can also be open to something either the subject mentions, or just something that the environment suggests, or just something that happens on set, or just, I don't know, I just even get an idea on set and I'm like, let's do X. Let's do
Right.
this. This will be awesome.
Yeah.
And in a way too, all the preparation I've done, whether it's research or watching videos of the people, or even just being present on set, is prepare me to I always want to go deeper. I always want to do better than my ideas I prepared ahead of time. And also too, for me, it's always that balance of the kind of conceptual prop driven thing, and then also having a sense of authenticity or gesture. Because I think my best pictures have that mix of feeling like there's an idea there, but there's also a connection to the real world, like a connection to actual real life too, and I mean, I don't always get it, and a lot of times, it's just getting the assignment done, but when it comes together, that's what I'm aiming for. It's like that mix of a kind of ethereal, mysterious sort of what's going on, and a sense of groundedness coming from a genuine moment.
Yeah. I love that about your work. I mean, it's something that's always spoken to me when I've looked at your work. The first time I discovered it, I was like, there's always this ethereal nature to it, that there's always something missing or absent, that it's there, but you don't immediately catch it. And you really have to kind of get into it. And I love that there's always this element that draws you in further. Like I said, it's not heavy handed. It's not in your face. It's not like the Mariah
Thanks.
Carey screaming 25 octaves. It's more like those subtle undertones, the music that exists, in the realm of other music, those little kind of fine notes and sweeping melodies that happen that you don't even realize that are undulating and pulling you along. That's the thing that I find so incredibly compelling and dynamic about your work. And I love that component. I love the component that it sounds to me like so much of what you do is satisfying your own curiosity, and you have to be happy with the work for you, even though you're satisfying the client. So it's the hierarchy is maybe you have to produce something that you are happy with. You also have to make the client happy. And then if you connect with the subject and you become buddies, that's just icing.
Yeah. Well, I almost never become friends with the subjects. I mean, it really is. like in the Uneasy book, I think there might be 4 people who I could email or call and they'll like return my call. So it's not really a thing for me. And I mentioned that partially because I do think that's part of my approach, is that I'm really not there to make friends. I'm there to make pictures. And it's kind of a headspace thing, you know? I mean, I'm not looking to take people down or like be unflattering, but it's just not where I'm aligned to something else. But I will say that like, one of the reasons I do those like 5 setups or whatever is that like 2 of those might be right in the sweet spot for the client. And then maybe one of those is a full-on weirdo Chris Buck picture. And then 2 of those 5 are kind of in the general direction of the client, but with a lot of Chris Buck in there. So in a way, like I'm having hit all the marks, you know? And I mean, obviously like the ones I think are better. And like when people looked at the Uneasy book, you know, someone would ask me like, "Oh, are these the outtakes?" And I'll say no. The magazine ran the outtake. This is the shot.
Exactly, because in your view, you got the safety shots for the magazine, but you also got the shots for you, and I love that. I mean, I completely agree with that ideology, and I feel the same way about what I do. But obviously, this is more about you. But it's interesting to hear you articulate it like that.
But I think it's also in the magazine's interest as well. And I think they know that. They know that, because it's not uncommon that they're going to use either the Chris Buck crazy shot or the kind of mix of my take and their direction. So it's so they, you know, they generally really encourage. I mean, when I shot Obama, the client specifically said, if you see a crazy Chris Buck shot on there, go for it.
Have you ever?
Did you have a lot of time when you shot Obama, or?
It was 4 minutes, 11 seconds, 22 milliseconds.
Wow.
Nice.
Chris, I'd love for you to walk us through your Billy Joel photo of him sitting on the bed with the applause sign. Okay. And so everyone out there that's listening, I have a unique insight to Chris's work because I was an intern for him in 2012. And we could talk a little bit more later about how it sort of shaped my approach to portraits, which it definitely has. But one of my favorite photos, and I've seen a lot of them, is your Billy Joel photo. And sort of, we were talking about maybe one of your underplayed, not, it's not your typical, if you get in a room with Billy Joel, you're going to, you know, that's the shot you would think of. But it's very you, and speaks to me.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
So the so for that, in the picture, it's a black and white picture, very dark, and he's sitting on a bed with an applause sign on his lap. It's almost like standing in for a keyboard. So obviously, like any shoot, I've got lots of ideas. I actually didn't even clear that idea by the magazine. I knew about that sign because I'd seen it in a prop shop in New York. And I just made a plan to like build an extra time on the way to the shoot and rent the sign. So I rented it, brought it with me. You know, I had an assistant, and I don't remember how long we had with him, but we set up in the bedroom of this hotel suite. And with the applause sign, and you plug it in, you literally plug it into the wall. So it's an applause sign they'd have like at a TV studio. It would blink when you're supposed to, you know, clap. And so you literally just plug it into the wall and it lights up. And so we did these tests, these Polaroids with my assistant sitting on the bed, and we plugged the light in, and I literally just kind of pulled the drapes shut and then kind of did a few Polaroids to see what the ratio was like. I want it to be really dark. You know, one of the things that's great about shooting celebrities, you know, Adam, you're talking about the kind of layers of meaning with the celebrities. One of the real values of shooting celebrity is they bring their whole baggage of who they are to the shot. So in a way, I don't have to do that much to make it interesting. If I can do a little bit of a surprise, that adds a whole world of narrative to the picture. So because it's Billy Joel and he's a performer, have the applause sign, there's this obvious connection. And I do think there's a kind of sadness to him that that I've always perceived. So I thought it kind of suit him. So I love shooting in hotel rooms too, but by shooting black and white and making it dark, it kind of simplified an otherwise more cluttered space. So he comes in the room and he sits on the bed, and I show him the Polaroid. I'm like, this is what we're gonna do. And I give him the sign, and he kind of says, he pauses, and he's like, well, people who know me would tell you that I'm not necessarily someone who needs constant attention and affirmation. He said, but it's cool, so I'll do it. So he sits down, we get the sign, and I kind of pull the drapes a little bit to adjust the lighting. And I do, a frame or two. It's a really long shutter speed. I'm like, hold still, shoot a frame. He's like, where's your lights? I said, we're just using the window light. He's like, you're fucking crazy, man. And yeah, I mean that's the story behind it. Is there any?
But
is there
I'm
any
curious.
particular question you have about it?
Well, no, I mean, I was, basically your story is exactly what I was looking for. But I'm also curious if you remember what camera and film, because you're saying it was film. You were taking Polaroids.
Yeah.
So it was on here. We talk a lot about different
Sure.
cameras and film, and yeah.
It was a Mamiya RZ67, and the film was black and white, so it was that Ilford 3200.
Mm-hmm.
And I might have pushed it a bit, as one will do. That's the whole point of that film.
Yeah, you see a bit of grain in there, so it looks really nice.
And it's one of the. I love shooting medium format, and actually moving from film to digital was really hard for me because it took me a while to realize that medium format would be my direction. And partially because the cameras are being updated and changed every year, and initially the medium format cameras are really studio cameras, and you really couldn't use them very well out in the field. But as time went by, they became more flexible, and that became where I landed. Now I shoot all Hasselblad medium format with the H4X body and the P65 back, which is kind of ancient itself now. But I'll buy a new one when that one dies. But I love shooting medium format. There's a way in which it slows you down just enough that it there's a little bit more purposefulness in the way the shoot goes. There's also something about the subject seeing that camera and being like, oh, you're a real photographer. Like my uncle doesn't have that one,
Yeah.
We talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
And sometimes showing up with, and when it's a perfect combination is when you feel a connection to the camera that enables you to do your art and take the photos you want to take, but also sort of garners that respect from everyone else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
I had an H2 body with a P45 plus back and a P40 plus, whatever. And I loved it. I mean, it was probably some of the best images I've ever made.
Amazing. The image quality is insane.
Insane. But what a quirky system that thing is. Batteries, I mean, I don't know, 10, 12 batteries.
Yeah.
I guess the payoff is worth it, but it's interesting to see that you're still in that system, and obviously it's not hurting or anything. I mean, I think
it's just the expense. If I do a commercial job, I'll rent a more up-to-date, like I don't know what they're called. I'll rent the more up-to-date cameras, and it depends on the job. Like if I have to do like more kind of reportage style, then I'll get like a DSLR camera.
Are you still using the Canon when you need it?
Yeah, I mean, these days I'm seeing people using the Nikons more. So if I rented one today, I'd probably do a Nikon. Honestly, I'd probably ask my assistant what they recommend.
Right.
And like when I was so for a few years, I was just renting cameras, and I wouldn't learn them. I would just like ask my assistant, "You know how this camera works?" And they'd be like, "Yeah." Like, okay, show me the basics, and then if anything goes wrong, I'll just hand it to you.
I remember you gave me it was for one of the shoots I was on with you. I picked up some H body and the camera back, and you gave it to me that night. You're like, I want you to learn this camera tonight.
Yeah, sorry.
and bring it. No, and bring. It was amazing. I'm sitting on my couch and I'm just like, how the fuck does this thing?
Reading
How do
the
I turn it
manual.
on? How do I even put the back on the camera?
Yeah, it's
Have you
scary.
changed settings?
But of course, we were at the shoot and it ran into some issues, and I think I was able to troubleshoot whatever we needed to.
An
but
Hasselblad digit in medium
there was
format
some
issues
there was
on
some
a shoot.
Right.
But yeah,
First time. Yeah.
Right. Who would have thought? You know, it's interesting. You touched briefly on your transition from film to digital, but when you made that transition, you went to medium format. And a lot of other photographers that have sustained careers, and I say that, you know, I really emphasize that because I do know a lot of photographers that had very good photography careers like in the 80s, 90s. And then when the transition came, they just could not deal. And they kind of ended up shifting gears. And you know, fortunately, you hung in there and have created and continue to create amazing work. When you made that transition, was it really hard for you? And was it something that like the magazines expected and kind of forced you into doing?
Yeah, well, there are many reasons I switched over, and you've touched upon a couple of them. One of them was the client. I remember I did a job, and I was shooting, you know, medium format camera, studio shoot for GQ, and we did all the retouching and handed it in. Images looked great, and I get a phone call from like someone on the technical side of the magazine saying that there's a problem with the images. And I said, well, what is it? They said, there's these little specks on them in just the finest detail.
Oh my God.
And I was like, yeah, it's grain. Yeah, it's.
Oh my God. So some like young schmuck at
No, it was they were very decent about it.
All right.
Once they knew what it was, it was cool. But
once they knew what it was.
But they just
But, you know,
that's so funny. So
it
what
was-
does that sorry.
but a big part of it was that because I literally transitioned for like 6 years. So part of the, I mean, not 6, maybe 4 years, but it was a long time for me to finally actually buy a camera. But one of the main things was I looked forward and I thought, is there any world in which I can be shooting film in 10 years? And the answer was no. It just, you know, part of it is like I was middle-aged. It's the idea that if I'm shooting film, it kind of says the old guy can't swing with the times, you know? But part of it was I knew I'd be shooting another 25 years. I wasn't going to be like, you know, holding on for dear life to my, you know, Mamiya 6.7. Like, it'd be idiotic.
What do you like? I mean, what do you prefer if you had your choice?
Once I bought a medium format, digital format, I sold my my film camera and everything I shoot digital now. I mean, if someone asked me to shoot film, I guess I'd do it, but I think they're nuts.
It's interesting because again, you know, a lot of photographers that I know that sustained photography careers like you have feel the exact same way. That once they made that transition, they never want to shoot another roll of film again. It's not because, you know, they don't appreciate using film cameras and the look of film. It's just the workflow. It's just behind them.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because you seem to be, you know, kind of aligned with that same kind of mentality.
I mean, I think part of it is to make a big change like that, you have to go all in.
Right.
I think that's a big part of it. You know, because it took me so long to crack like being happy with digital images. Once I got there, I was really ready to jettison everything from my past.
But
What look were you when you're saying you finally became happy, what look were you going for that you just couldn't find?
I think that with the DSLR, I don't know if it's the lenses or just the way that it just transfers life into images. It just felt, the way I would put it is the tones didn't flow well. It felt very chunky, like you almost kind of got blocks of like, here's the face block and here's the clothing block. And the separation between, in a way, like I actually do think in a weird way, DSLRs render the real world more accurately than film does.
Right.
Or
They do.
life, the way it kind of fuzz things together. That was what we thought good images look like. Now, obviously, I want my pictures to look good and look nice. By going to the medium format, to me, it felt like shooting like Kodachrome back in the day, Kodachrome 25, because I'm shooting at super fine grain, but the tones flow nicely, but they're also super precise. So there's a kind of it like that really felt like almost like medium medium like a large format camera or something, like not in terms of the lens relationship, but in terms of the way it renders everything like with such precision, and the details insane. That's what I really like about it. I mean, it has changed the way I shoot. I find I'm trying to make my pictures dirtier because they look too clean with the digital. Like, there's something about the way that digital renders the world that's too clean looking. So I find that I kind of, and I'll just as a perfect segue, my next big project, which is my next book, is called Gentleman's Club, and it's strippers, boyfriends, husbands, and partners. So
Wow.
I really
unbelievable.
Yeah, I am committing to going dirtier.
I remember you mentioning that to me, what, 8 years ago. And when did you start that? When did you start that project?
So I think I started it like 2014. Yeah, and I just did one like 3 weeks ago. That might be the final one, but I mean, it's nearly finished. It's all the interviews. There's interviews. There's 40 meetups with exotic dancers partners. So there's interviews, photographs. It's going to be like a 200-page book. It's going to be insane.
You don't do small books, man.
I know. I try.
Speaking of books, and not to minimize that, because that is something that I can't wait to see. I mean, basically doing a book of this size was because this is really how images look good. You know, you really need
I had no idea
big.
it'd be that big. I mean, I really was like slightly horrified when it arrived, but you know, because you just look at PDFs, right? The designers send you PDFs, and it says so many pages, but you're like, well, I'm sure it'll be fine. But you get it. It's just massive thing. I mean, one of the good things, it's so tall.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
It makes the proportion make sense. The reason it was the designer's idea to make it tall, and initially I was like, why would you do that? Like, because most of the pictures are vertical, vertical, maybe a 6/7 frame. So why wouldn't you make the dimensions the same as a 6/7 frame?
Right.
And he's Italian, and he's like, no, people get so bored. You can't be doing that. You have to have the little mix of the space, and up at the top of the page, the small of the page, and it goes across the page. And so and he was really right. If it was like, 300 pages of everything the same dimensions, it'd be a real drag. It'd be really hard to go through. So I think this way, it makes the journey is actually, it feels like you're in different parts of the journey as you go through it, which is nice.
Yeah.
Chris, so when you, I just wanted to touch one more about the film you were shooting. Did you have any favorite films that you were using back in the day, besides Kodachrome, maybe? Just your favorite.
I didn't really shoot. I shot Kodachrome, I think, like when I first started. But it was just so impractical. But favorite films, I really liked the films with the very sort of soft contrast. It's almost like the kind of films like I remember seeing wedding shooters shooting films like portrait type films, and I liked that, like, because as a portrait photographer, I like the skin tones to render really beautifully, and so I always stayed away from those high contrast sort of vivid films. I get why people are drawn to them, but because to me it's always a portrait first, that the skin tones need to render well. So I always went, and also too, in doing lighting was a challenge for me for like a decade and a half. So the lighting always looked too harsh. So using films that had a more gentle contrast helped me just a little bit.
Do you now I know with the Billy Joel portrait, you lit it and I used air quotes because you utilized the blinds to kind of just selectively bring in that bit of light. And you know, obviously, look, a natural light source is a light source. You know, it could be your key, it could be a fill, whatever. What is, if you want to elaborate on it, what is your approach to lighting? You know, nowadays, or maybe as it evolved?
Sure. Well, initially, for anyone who wants to learn about lighting and is finding it a tough nut to crack, I certainly feel you. Like it was a big challenge for a long time, and my early portfolio was literally like 90% available light photos for like the first 15 years, and I would shoot stuff that was lit, but I would almost never select it for my book, and so at some point I really need to learn, especially I think when I got into doing more advertising, you need to make it look great in any context. And the day when I knew I'd learned how to light was when we had some shot. It was quite complex where we're shooting towards a window, like looking out. So we need to get light. We need to see something about, but our lights were being reflected in the glass of there's like an office space. And I figured out the solution before my assistants did. So that was the day I knew how to light, was when I could do it better than the assistant. But the biggest tip I'd give, and someone gave me this suggestion and it was genius, is to use just one strobe. Take one strobe with you and shoot with it until you know it inside and out, and you know what it's going to do when you move it around, and and you find a number of solutions with it. Right. And if you can light with one light, then you'll understand as you bring in additional lights. I think for young people, when they come in and they have set three lights and they start to try lighting it,
right,
and it just, no matter where they put the lights, it looks terrible. And it just looks like it's overlit and badly lit. And I think that one light thing, which I did literally for like a year and a half, that's all I did was take one light with me and use it. And I made some great shots with it too, because I had to. That's the only light I had. And I'd often just put it like right over camera, or I'd maybe blend in a little bit of a lamp or a window, and so that would kind of be a sneaking in a second source. And so, but that was great because actually was teaching me organically in the field. But having just one strobe and doing tons of Polaroids was just like genius.
Yeah, I think that's the best advice you could give anybody learning lighting. And it's certainly what I impart to people that ask me the same thing, is that learn how to use one light, get really good at that. And there's nothing worse when you see somebody show up with like 4 lights and they set them all up without testing anything, and then they fire them all and you're like, oh, yeah, that's never going to look right.
Yeah.
So that's amazing advice. It's the same idea, like somebody starting off with photography, like, somebody's like, oh, what zoom should I buy? What lenses? And I'm like, just get a 50 millimeter lens, put that on your camera for the first 6 months. Figure out that, know exactly what that lens sees, and your brain will think that way before you even consider adding something else to it. But yeah, no, I love the lighting in your photography, and it's so evocative. It creates mood. It's part of the story. It's almost like how vinyl, like vinyl was like an instrument in a recording because it added such warmth and depth. It's like, I feel like that your use of lighting is very critical to the storytelling that you're doing in your photography, because it never takes over.
Yeah.
So
that's a
in
big
other words,
part of my approach is that I'm not. There are photographers out there who are fantastic, who are really, what I'd call like lighting masters, and almost no one's going to come to me and say, I love your lighting, because it's not really about the lighting, you
right.
know? But I do agree that just because it's not my thing, like in a way, my whole goal was to have you not think about the lighting. And
Right.
that was my genius stroke, if there is one, is that you don't comment on the lighting.
I think that's something that
100%. It's not in your face. It's not overdone in any way, but it's so subtle, and it adds to the story, adds to the portrait.
Right. Well, that's the thing is, anytime you're making any picture where you're trying to tell a story, everything you do, from lighting to props to gesture, it either supports the narrative you're pushing, or it takes away from it. And
Right.
if if it's taken away from it, you get too much of that, and then people are just confused.
I agree. And I feel like when I first discovered your work, that approach had a huge influence on me as well. You know, trying to get away from things that I call them like that look flashy, you know, that look like, and there is like the Terry Richardson, like, okay, that is flashy because that's his vibe. But when things look lit and they're not beautifully lit, then it's like, it kind of cheeses it out, for lack of a more intellectual way of putting it.
Well, especially as a photographer, it'd be like being a musician and being like, oh my God, it's like peaking out constantly. It's driving me crazy. It's all you could hear, you know?
It's like when I had to take the China Boy away from my drummer, which is like a cymbal that is so fucking loud that it drowns everything out every time you hit it. So that subtlety.
Move it farther from the microphone.
What's that?
Move it farther from the microphone.
Well, it was like, sorry,
I shouldn't be telling you how to do sound.
Oh, no. Was that too loud?
No, I was saying like with the cymbal, if you move it farther from the mic, then you would still sound
100%.
Good. Yeah.
Right. But what I was saying before is I feel like so much of the tone that you're setting with your photos have to do with the way that you've kind of adapted to this creative lighting style that you utilize that is almost anti-lighting, because you're lighting in such a way that the viewer is not thinking like all the technical bullshit. Like, oh, you know, that must have been like at an inverse ratio of blah, blah, blah. Like, yeah, I mean, light meters, you know, when I first, you know, when I talk about lighting, it's like, yeah, I have a light meter and I use a light meter, but that's not going to tell me the mood and the vibe. It's going to just give me a framework. Like, it's going to say like, okay, if you start here, the light's going to look pretty good. But to really communicate the vibe, you know, so I love that mentality. And I'm sure that you've had to impart that to your assistants as well, who probably come in and just want to light the shit out of everything when they're first green. And then you say,
I know, because I'm subtly clear about, because I think some photographers really let the assistants kind of just do the lighting.
Right.
I never seen it, but this is what I'm told. But I'm really very clear about like, I want it like this. So so they know just to do, you know, obviously if they work with me a couple of times, then they know my little tricks and things I tend to like too. I'll tell you one of my tricks. Do you want to know the Chris Buck lighting trick? One of the things I almost always do if I light is I put a small box over the camera, symmetrically right over the camera, and I set it about a stop and a half under the key light. And what it does, it gives a little kiss of light everywhere, and it allows me to be more brazen with my other lights.
Nice.
And
I like that.
By putting it symmetrically right over the lens, it doesn't seem to be causing a shadow. Our brain doesn't perceive it as a light source. It just looks like bounced light.
Right.
Like it looks like an invisible film.
It's like ambience, basically.
Yeah, exactly. It looks like ambient light. And so what it does, because my biggest challenge was always that every new light I added put in shadows, and those shadows were a tell, right?
Right.
By putting that light over camera, it was sort of my safety, right? So I could get a little light everywhere, even in my kind of shadows. It gave a little kiss of light. And then I could just be totally brazen with the rest of the lights.
Well, there you go, guys.
You told me never to tell anybody that, Chris.
There's the key to the universe, everyone. So that's amazing. I mean, it's so generous of you to share that, you know, because it used to be that photographers would just zip it, you know, like, here's the magic I create.
But not like, no one's coming to my work to steal my lighting.
Well, and nobody can be you. I mean, you do what you do, and
that's it.
That's why people, you know, admire your work and hire you.
Okay, now I'll tell you how to do Dan Winter's lighting.
You know Dan Winter's lighting?
No, I'm just joking. I'm not going to tell you that.
No? Come on. I love his work, man. He does some amazing stuff.
Now, he's the lighting master.
Yeah.
Because when he nails it, it's just like, what is going on? It's like so rich. It's like velvety, you know?
Yeah. I mean, look, there's a lot of photographers that have such a signature look that the minute you look at a portrait, you're like, oh yeah, that's Martin Schulter.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah, totally.
But I think that the thing that I love about what you do is that the subtleties. And I think that that's the thing that's always really been so exciting for me, is that there's this chaotic situation, but it's subtle. You have to really kind of like climb in there. And yeah, I love that. So,
well, you're welcome. Come on, climb in anytime.
yeah, it's exciting. I mean, look, I'll be honest. Like, I'm really, you're somebody who I've admired their work for a very long time. So it's a real honor to have you on our show and to have you share these incredible stories. Are there any other shoots that you've been on that are particularly notable that you want to share with us? What's that?
You tell me.
Oh my God. I mean, where do we start? Daniel?
I actually I don't want to go to a different shoot. I want to go back to Obama, because the look he's giving you, and what was that interaction like with him? Because there's a special look that he's giving you that just draws you in and makes you want to know the story behind that photo. And if there's more than one I'm thinking of, I think you know what I'm talking about.
Sure. So when I went to go shoot him, we were told we'd have between 3 and 5 minutes. And so we basically had 3 shots we had discussed with the White House. And the first setup was just like a sort of a clean, tight headshot straight on. And the second shot was for the classic 3/4, looking away. And then the third shot was pulled back, showing all of our apparatus and lighting and stuff in the context of the White House. So we got shooting, and time was actually moving really slow because it was very intense for me. But a couple minutes in, someone, I think from the Secret Service, said, all right, our communications staff, I guess, someone from the White House said, let's move along to the next setup. So move on to the next setup. It's a classic 3/4, kind of like, almost like, think like Life magazine, 1960s or something. So he's looking away, 3/4 view. And I say, sir, hold your head position, but look back with your eyes. And he looks at me and says, I don't do that. And I snap the picture. And that's the one.
Wow.
Amazing. And then was that the last frame that you took, or did you go on?
No, we went on from there. Well, it's funny when I tell that story, one time someone from the audience asked, did they open the back of your camera and take out the film?
Do you get a sinking feeling like you got away with something when you do that? Or do you
You know what? I'd had some shoots with politicians where I was intimidated, but also just, I don't know, I was just too respectful. And I had decided no more. Like I have to go in there and do my job and do my thing. The morning of the shoot, we were sitting at breakfast, my 2 assistants and the creative director. And I'm dressing sort of normal, the way I usually dress. It's just like it's like a simple t-shirt with I might have been wearing a jacket and black jeans. And he says, so you're going to go, change into a suit after breakfast? And I'm like, no. I know I'm not going to do that. He's like, but you're going to the White House. You're meeting the president. And I was like, yeah, and the president's meeting me. And my assistants
Was the president wearing a suit?
Well, yes. But because he was meeting me, right? And then I said, look, I said, he's lucky I'm taking his picture. And I said, on his deathbed, he's going to say, that Chris Buck portrait, that was the one. And my creative director's looking at me like, are you nuts? And what I was getting at is that, look, I get that he's up here and I'm way, way down here. Like I'm just trying to level the playing field a little bit in my mind, because once we get in there, I need to deliver. And my biggest obstacle is my mental headspace. So I really need to go in there with an attitude of, we're also shooting in the White House. So we're shooting in his office. But, my thinking was like, okay, you're the commander-in-chief, but I'm the commander of this shoot. When he came in the room, he shook everyone's hands and he went over to our little setup area. And I said, sir, are you chewing gum? And he said, dude, don't worry, I'll take care of it. And I said, okay, well, if I catch you again, I'll be talking to you about it. And no one laughed. Like, I mean, it was obviously a joke, but it was kind of my way of saying like, okay, let's get to work. Let's do this thing. Because the thing is that it goes back to one of the first things we talked about, which is it's my job to get the shot. And he was great. Like, he arrived, he was ready to work. You know, the fact is that, like Daniel asked, like, what connection we had, he was very businesslike. You know, there's no pleasantries aside from a handshake. There's no small talk at all. And I was totally ready to have small talk, as one usually does, but he was all business, and it was great because I was all business too in the end. Like, I got a great shot. I got a history-making shot. I'd much rather have that than a funny anecdote about, talking.
No,
about
of course.
daughters.
But what I was going for, and what I was asking the question to get, was you asking him to do something that he did not want to do, or that he doesn't do, and that was the look. That's the memorable shot. So when you're on set and do I ask someone to do this? What if they say no, and then I'll be embarrassed, and your mind can race. But if you don't ask, even if they say no, you can still get the shot that you dreamt about.
Well, then that's the thing is I'd had multiple politician shoots where I was nice and got no good pictures. So I was like, you know what? I don't care. I don't want to be nice. I want to get a good picture. This is my goal of this shoot.
Do you have a lot of time to prepare your setup before you?
So we had a couple hours to prepare, which was great. Like, you could see, I don't know if you know the shot, but the shot's beautifully lit. I mean, in a way too, like, we just finished talking about how I'm not like a lighting guy, but I was like, the chance of my getting a unique picture out of this is really low. So I got to really lean into the lighting on this one. So that's what I did is I'd stay up at night. I'd lie in bed, look at the ceiling, like thinking, how am I going to light this?
I can't even tell you how many nights, before big shoots, just running through a million different, because you've got everything, like you've read the creative brief 1,000 times, you've met with the client, you've gone and done your pre-production meetings, you've like thought of every possible scenario. There's even times when like I will set up a mock setup. And I'll be like, my subject's going to be here. I'll be standing here. The lighting will be here, just to get a sense of like the interplay, knowing that I'm only going to have a short time. And still you're lying in bed staring at, the ceiling, oh my God, I don't want to sleep through my alarm. I mean, I think that's probably what keeps us going as photographers is that fear of the unknown, kind of running toward it for some reason. Not just going in and punching a clock and, climbing up the corporate ladder and blah, blah, blah. Like there's something that compels us to do something that like kind of drives us mad most of the time.
Well, I told you about that shoot I did with the artist recently. So we are waiting at like a kebab place, waiting for the building to open up so we could go in and get ready. And I thought, this shoot's going to be canceled. And I was really relieved. I was like, this is so stressful. I don't want to be doing it. I just want to go home. And I'm like, and then I pause and I'm like, or I could pivot to the studio and be crazy for the rest of the day. Let's do that instead. And, I would have been relieved to have gone home, but I also would have been disappointed too, because you're right. Like, it really is, every shoot is potential disaster. And then it's one of the reasons I prepare so much. And even though, of course, I'm likely to be fine. Even if you throw me in a situation, I'll probably come out with a great shot. But it's the preparation is huge for creating that mental space where I can go in and be like my whole thing of being open. The preparation is almost to allow me to be open when I get there. Because in a way, it just takes that. It makes me feel like I'm as ready as I can be. I'm like 99% there.
Yes.
So now when I'm on set, I can be a little zen and be open to what possibilities are here.
Well, it eliminates the need for one to question themselves and second guess. So you've run through scenarios A, B, C, and D. You know that no matter what, if you set things up and you follow this basic protocol for doing your portrait work, that that you're going to get the safety shot that is on the shot list.
Yeah.
So that liberates you to open. I just love that mentality, that philosophy. I'm definitely going to, throw that in there as well, because
Absolutely.
it's just such a good way to be, to allow yourself. And that's the thing, like, you've given yourself permission. You're saying, I know what I'm doing, that I can open, and
I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm still stressed on set.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I don't relax until like a half an hour after the shoot, but in a way that not relaxed is in the zone. It's in that nice zone of like, so I'm zen in that kind of the middle pathway, actually. Like, it really is the yin and the ideal with the yin and yang is to be walking the path of the middle of like stability and chaos, right?
Right.
Where that line of tension, and that's when I'm in the good place. That's where I am, where I'm like, I'm on edge, but I'm also in control. And it's funny. There's a story. I did a shoot with Kendrick Lamar, and my biggest complaint was that he was so nice and so chill. It was really throwing off my vibe. Like, it was way too chill, and his people were really nice too, and everybody's like hanging out, and the whole vibe of the space says, don't worry, we'll hang out until it's done and it's all good. And I'm like, I had to keep reminding myself, at some point they're going to say, hey, we're going to leave after this setup. And that means everything I need to kind of think, I need to think backwards and get everything I need before that moment happens. And that could be in this setup, because I knew if I'd asked, then it was making it too literal, right? If I said, hey, what time do we have Kendrick until, then it would have thrown off the vibe, but also it just would have been too precise for what was sort of going on in that shoot day.
That's an interesting thing.
But I had to kind of freak myself out to get myself in the zone. It was very weird.
Because and this is what I was talking about earlier, the energy, like, you really can feed off of your subject's energy sometimes. So by their relaxed and chill vibe, you're thinking like, I got this shot list. I got to get these shots done. I got to get this done, because I know that this dude could literally bounce at any time. And if I don't have my shots, that's it. I don't have my shots. And
and it was just one of those shoots where, like, he was so nice and so decent. Like, I was like, he's going to probably invite me to dinner next week. Like, and it's like, I'm thinking, that's not going to happen. Like, this is like 30 years into my career. I should know better. But you still get fooled by it, right?
Right. Because he's like saying like, hey, dude, you can chill, you can relax, help yourself to whatever you want. You're
exactly.
Here today. And
he's saying yes to almost everything. And but in a way, like, I think it did hurt the pictures. Like, there was a lack of tension in that space that also, I mean, look, I take responsibility for it, but I think that it translated to the images. I like some tension in there, and that shoot, it's too chill.
I guess for a lot of the people you're shooting, they're accustomed to being in a photo shoot. They've been
no, most people don't like it, and
right.
They come in, like, people come in and they're like not happy. Like, I've had people be really rude to me that I know is because they just don't like being photographed. It's not personal.
Yeah, it's interesting. And do you find that so when you're on set, like, let's say you've got a digi tech or whatever, are you sharing anything along the way with your subjects to put them at ease, or is it just really just the rapport that
it's kind of intuitive. I mean, I like to have the veneer of transparency, if not the reality of it. I want them to feel like if they want to see, they can see, but I don't offer it unless they ask.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously it's different with digital than with film, because with digital they can just walk over.
Yeah.
It's funny. I photographed Annie Leibovitz a couple of years ago, and it was a very tense shoot. She was really quite difficult, and my poor assistant, who is a big fan of Annie's work, had to close the laptop every time Annie came around to peek.
I've been on those shoots before where the subject comes around and they want to take control and say, I like this, I don't like that, don't. And you just you have to like be able to. It's again that performer kind of audience or barrier. It's like you wouldn't jump on stage when a band's playing.
Right.
It's
totally.
like
some people do.
I know, but that's kind of a
depends
violation.
on the band.
Right.
But
Chris,
and I will say that like I'm happy to show a subject a few frames, especially
Right.
at the beginning, kind of like the equivalent of a Polaroid, right?
Sure.
But once we get going, I will discourage it and say, because they'll be like, they'll shoot a few and say, oh, let's see. And I'll be
Right.
like, let's just keep the flow going. I think we're
Yeah.
gonna get. I'm happy to show you a little bit at the end, but I think we're throwing off our energy by kind of stopping and starting. So I'll kind of pivot it like that. Stage will they won't necessarily like throw off the person dancing. They'll like dance with them a bit and then kind of give a nod to the security on the sides of the stage. Like, all right, let's take care of this.
Yeah.
One question: do you oppose people at all, or do you just give them the freedom to kind of be the way they are?
When people come in, I try to. It's funny because on ad jobs, I'll always say to the creative director, like, I want you with me. I want you right next to me. Like, you're my collaborator. Let's really do this. But I'll give a disclaimer and say, but give me the first 10 minutes to build a rapport. Also, I'll say, let's not over direct in the front end. Let's see what they do. I'll give a kind of vague direction. And then I want to see what they do, because people will do interesting kind of odd posing that I could never think of on my own. But as we go through a shoot, I'll see people do things and I'll pick up on them and I'll say, I want you to do this thing again that you did. I mean, one of the kind of obvious tricks in portraiture in general is oh, do that again. And it's something that comes up. I mean, a lot of my best pictures are really like observing someone doing something and then saying, hey, you did this thing, do that. Because it's still like a bit of an odd pose, but because it comes from them, they recognize the authenticity in it. And they say, all right, it's from me. He's not imposing something on me. It strikes them as being genuine because I'm kind of mirroring something I saw, right? And that's something I do. Sometimes I just put people, I physically force them into awkward physical places, or I'll have them sit a certain way or stand a certain way or stand in a certain place where it's very difficult to do so naturally. And that forces a kind of reckoning with their physicality.
That's nice, because like one of the photos that stuck out to me when I was looking at your work was, I hope I got this right, Snoop Dogg. Was that Snoop Dogg? Because he's like standing there, and I don't know, I just love that image, that just.
I think my memory of it is that there's that beautiful light there, and he's so tall and skinny, and I want to make him even longer. And that's why I asked him to touch the ceiling.
Yeah.
It's interesting because you're looking at his form.
Yeah.
And you're looking at him in so many different dimensions, but then you're looking like, oh, look at this long, lanky dude.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. Let's get that
let's
going. Yeah.
Well, also too, we came the day before to shoot him, and he showed up so late we had no light, so I actually had to rebook my flight because I was supposed to fly out the next day back to New York. So we had to rebook my flight a day away, and I came back the next day. And the fact that he knew he'd screwed us over the day before, he was really great, really open and really flexible. Also, I brought him a giant bottle of gin as a gift of Bombay Sapphire. And he said, I can't drink that stuff. It makes me crazy, but I'll keep it for my friends. I do. One of my things, I bring gifts for people if I can. If I read about someone and they're a fan of someone I photographed, I'll sometimes bring them a print, like a beautiful 11 by 14 print, and give it as a gift. And it kind of gets them in my camp a little bit. When I ask them to do the crazy shot, they can't resist because they feel they owe me.
That's pretty smart. I like
so that kind of goes back to the beginning when you're kind of luring them into bed.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly. It's the dinner in a movie. Yeah,
it's got to be a nice dinner, like per se.
Exactly.
And Lincoln Center opera, and then
exactly.
And then
hey, let's have a nightcap. Yeah.
Let's go to the motel and let's
Yeah, that's a great technique for sure. Definitely gets people in your camp endeared to you for sure.
Well, my picture of Donald Trump with the multiple mirrors.
Yeah.
I I brought a print from the previous session with him, and after we'd done our sort of preset photos for the magazine, I gave him this envelope, and he opened it up and he said, "What is it?" I said, "It's a gift for you to buy an extra setup." And he shrugged and said, "Okay." And he did the shot. And that's how I got this amazing picture of him.
And I think about what you say a lot is, your personal projects. And like we said, I heard 8 years ago talking about this, the exotic dancer partners, and that you have a project, you figure out how to do it, and you do it. And your likeness, right? It's the likeness. I mean,
yeah.
How did that even, shortly? How did that even come up? Did you see someone that looked like?
So likeness is a series I did of a 3D photograph of me, which basically ends up being like a little figurine, a 10-inch figurine of me. That's what you're referring to, right?
I'm actually I was referring to that. That might be the likeness. I might have gotten the name wrong. I'm referring to
the other Chris Bucks.
People's that look like, not the other Chris Bucks. That's something else. The people that look like celebrities.
Okay. Isn't.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So what was the question about it? How did it come up?
How did that even come about?
That was actually an assignment from Maxim magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And I recognized that there was potential to make it because it was inherently very commercial, because it was a recognizable faces, and it was meant to be conceptual and cute and funny. So I thought, well, if I can make versions of this that kind of dial it back a bit and are a little more kind of ambiguous and mysterious and odd, and just kind of in a way, my goal was let's just make them all surreal. And again, using that thing of the persona of the famous person we're referencing, whether it be like Pope Benedict or Bill Gates or George W. Bush, using some little signal from their story, then we could kind of create a little narrative around it. Those shoots are actually super hard. They're one of the hardest things I ever did, because when you do your first pass, you're choosing based on which pictures look the most like the person they're representing. So I might shoot 350 frames, and there's a dozen where he actually looks like George Bush.
Mm-hmm.
And everything. So then after that, all the elements of composition and gesture and all that take a back seat to, does it look like the person? And when I actually go and do shoots with actual celebrities after that, I was just so relieved that they always look like themselves.
That's fun. I didn't even think about that.
Right.
Amazing.
Yeah. Well, you've definitely done a lot of inspiring series, and I think that this is a good time for any of us that have been thinking about starting something new or getting to that series. Like Daniel said, he and I had been talking probably for the last 6 months about doing this podcast, and we just, when we had this time, we started doing it, and it's just kind of taken off from there. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, and we're so incredibly grateful that you were able to jump on here with us and share your stories, and kind of like a master class for anybody who's listening here, because there's some incredible nuggets for any photographer or any artist. You have some really, really great stuff to share about your approach and your ideology.
And I'm so happy to be here. Absolutely.
Yep.
Well,
we should, I'm sure everyone already follows you, Chris, but if they don't, you should follow Chris at your Instagram.
On Instagram is the Chris Buck.
Yeah, I will put links in the description for all the different. So if you're listening to this, obviously at the Chris Buck, you need to follow him. And I'm sure that you'll look at Chris's work, and then you'll end up at his website, and you'll probably end up at Amazon or somewhere else to buy one of his books, which I highly recommend. Because with the time that we have, there is nothing better than sitting down with an actual photo book, looking at the photos, reading the stories, and really kind of, I don't know, I find it inspirational. I find it something that kind of grounds me and kind of helps me to move forward with my photography. Again, we can't thank you enough for being here and taking the time to share with us. I'm a wee bit starstruck, in that respect, because I've admired your work for so long, and just talking to you, I feel like we could literally be here all day. So again, thank you so much. Make sure again to subscribe to this podcast. This podcast is found where most all podcasts are found now. So Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes. There's a link to just directly listen and download below. You can just, if you're on YouTube, you've been watching it all the way to the end. Thank you for watching as well. That's it for now. Thanks so much, and we'll see you soon.